thanks everyone for joining us. We're really lucky to have Raquel Garcia today with us. Firstly, I just wanted to acknowledge the people of the Kulin Nations on whose land that all of us are gathered wherever we are today. And I just wish to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and future. So you might notice my background. I'm virtually joining you from the generator. I wish we were able to get back to the co-working space, but no doubt we will be there one day. And as part of the generator community, one day when we get there, we hope we can say hi in the same space. So hopefully not too much longer in lockdown, but hopefully everyone is coping okay. Speaking of that, is Are You Okay Day today. So just a reminder to reach out, check in with yourself and others. It's a simple ask. If you are asking the question, remember to listen actively, encourage action. And what I really like to do is check in again, make a time to check in again with whoever you are having that conversation with. So thanks everyone for joining us. This is the Fundamental Founder, part of our webinar series where we speak to industry experts and people that can help the startup community at Monash. So we are presenting brand protection today with LEGITERATI, Raquel Garcia, Raquel at LEGITERATI. So Raquel is part of the generator community. She joined a validator program in 2018, so very much involved with the community. She's also been a brand and trademarks attorney, or been in the practice for over 10 years and has protected and enforced high-profile international brands such as Burger King, Bunnings, Goodyear, Diego, and is a startup founder herself, and has seen firsthand how brand protection is inaccessible and intimidating to founders, which made her decide to start her own brand protection firm in LEGITERATI. So I'll hand over to Raquel in a minute, but first I just wanted to ask a question. So Raquel, you're really well positioned to be the person to provide advice and support startups. So yeah, why did you start LEGITERATI? What made you?
Pretty much, so as you said, I've had years of trademarks, law enforcement sort of experience, but my first job out of law school and in the IP industry and brand protection was pretty much in this big law firm called ASIC-registered, and our client base were mainly big ones like ANZ, Diageo, Bunnings, as you have said, Goodyear. So these sort of companies that have the means to enforce their brands. But I pretty much left big law in 2016 to start my own thing. To start my own startups and being in the startup and this small business community, I sort of noticed that a lot of business founders, small business owners forego brand protection, as in getting a trademark for their brands and their intellectual property assets, because they think that it's actually inaccessible, and for good reason. You know, normally only big companies that are used to do brand protection for are the ones you think will be are able to afford trademark protection, but it's actually not the case. So I thought there was a scope there to step in and to be able to help small business owners. So they started as just like me, giving advice to some friends and, people in the small business community. And then I thought, why don't I start my own firm? But I didn't want to sort of go the legal way. I didn't want to have a law firm really. So I thought I deviate from that sort of route, and I started LEGITERATI in that it's not just a brand protection law firm. It's also a brand agency where we pretty much do all of your branding from creation up until protection and enforcement. So that's pretty much Legiterati in a nutshell.
Amazing. Thank you for the introduction. I think we've got a good crowd here. Let's get started. I believe you've built in some time at the end to answer some questions. So just a reminder to everyone that we are using Slido. I've just posted the link in the chat. So note down some questions, post them on Slido. Remember, to everyone in the audience, you can upvote questions and we'll work through them towards the end of the presentation with Raquel then. So thanks, Raquel. Over to you.
Cool. All right. Thanks, Lloyd. So again, welcome, guys. I'm really happy that you've joined us today. I just wanted to expand on what Legiterati offers before we jump into brand protection. So as I said, Legiterati is not just a law firm. It's an amalgamation of a branding firm and a trademarks law firm. So what we do is pretty much, this is it in a nutshell. We do more than this, but we do brand development and design, we do brand naming, we do trademark searches, we do freedom to operate advice, we do trademark applications, prosecutions and registrations, brand enforcement, IP strategy, and design registrations. So we pretty much equip small business owners, startup founders with everything that they need to start the business on a strong footing. So let's get into brand protection. All right, so as you may know, one of the first things that businesses or startups do once they've decided that they're going full steam ahead with their startup is get a business name. But many stop at that. They think that once they have locked in a business name, that's it, they own it. But this is actually not the case. A business name gives you a permit to run a business in Australia, but that's it. It doesn't necessarily mean that you own it exclusively. So how do you legally own your business or brand name and get a TM symbol next to your business name? You need to get a trademark. So having a trademark gives you exclusive rights to the name, and that means you can stop others from using the same or similar name. So there's so many benefits to getting a trademark apart from owning it exclusively, and I'll list some of the most important, most beneficial reasons for startups. So apart from having an exclusive right to the name, these are some of the reasons why you should get a trademark. So with a trademark, your startup pretty much starts on the right foot. It puts you in a strong footing pre-launch, and it gives you peace of mind knowing that you legally and exclusively own the name. It's much like insurance, really. Trademark registrations are property. This means that it can be commercialized through sale, license, and transfer. This is actually particularly beneficial if you're planning to exit the startup down the line. It's especially important if you have investors involved in your startup. Registered IP is one of the things that they will look for to be willing to invest. With a trademark, you can also take down online copycats. Social media channels like Instagram have a separate and stronger avenue for reporting fake accounts. You can report fake accounts for trademark violation, in addition to the standard way of reporting fake accounts. But to be able to file a trademark violation in Instagram, they will ask for a trademark registration. This this fake account reporting avenue is so much faster and much more certain than the standard way of reporting fake accounts. And speaking of social media, with a trademark, you can claim a social media handle that you prefer, but it's already taken. So case in point would be the Legiterati Instagram accounts. When we started the Legiterati Instagram account, we found that someone had already taken the name Legiterati as a handle, just the name. So we had to launch our Instagram with the handle Legiterati_. Once we were able to successfully register our trademark, we were able to go to Instagram and request for the Legiterati, just the word, to be handed over to us. And yeah, we were successful in that. It's not always, it's on a case-by-case basis, but with a trademark, you may be able to do something similar. Speaking of copycats, with a trademark, you can also take down domain name squatters. And one of the evidence materials that domain name dispute tribunals will ask for is a registered trademark to take down a domain name. And if you want that disputed domain name to be handed over to you, they will also ask for a trademark registration. So benefits don't just stop there. So with a trademark registration, you can get listed on the Amazon brand registry. Some of you may be familiar as to what Amazon brand registry is, but to those who are not, the Amazon brand registry is like an exclusive club of Amazon vendors, where these vendors' brands and intellectual property assets are protected by Amazon themselves from infringement and counterfeiting. So they pretty much monitor Amazon for people who copy you, not just your brand and your products, but to be eligible to be on the brand registry, you will need a trademark registration. A trademark registration is also useful if your startup is not an Australian legal entity. So say you don't have an Australian company number or a business number, getting a trademark, an Australian trademark, entitles you to a .au domain name. So that's one of the new requirements that they've put into law not long ago, earlier this year. And with the trademark registration, you can also obtain customs and border protection with the Australian Border Force to prevent the importation of counterfeit goods. So if you're registered with Australian Border Force, if someone imports counterfeit goods, they'll be able to stop it. But yes, you can only do that with a registered trademark. And one of the benefits that's also applicable to many of you is that with a trademark registration, you can stop online shops selling counterfeit or fake products or a copy of any of your products. So you can pretty much stop websites normally hosted by Shopify or Etsy. But to do that, they will ask for your trademark registration. If you find that someone is copying your product or your logo or your brand name on Alibaba, you will be able to report these to Alibaba as well. So you do that by reporting them for trademark infringements. Another case study that is also worth sharing is something that I did for a client of mine a couple of months ago. So a client of mine is a successful jewelry store here in Australia. And because of that success, a lot of copycat sort of websites have popped up selling jewelry that are pretty much a knockoff of hers. So what we did, the strategy for that one was we trademarked all, the relevant jewelry designs, mainly the pendants. And once they were registered, we were able to go to Shopify, who hosted these copycat websites for trademark infringement. And Shopify was able to stop these websites from selling these knockoff designs. We were able to do that on Etsy as well, and we sort of stopped it at the source at Alibaba and reported that to Alibaba as well. So yeah, so the trademark registration for those designs were very, very helpful to stop all of these knockoffs. So for these reasons, you can see that getting a trademark is one of the most invaluable things that you can do for your startup or business. But getting a trademark is not as easy as just getting a trademark. It has to jump through a hoop called the Trademarks Act 1995. So that's pretty much the legislation that governs trademarks in Australia. So this legislation has requirements that need to be met for a trademark to be registered. So from here, I'm going to call them trademarkable. So what makes a brand trademarkable? Don't worry, I won't recite the relevant section of the legislation here. That would be boring, but I'll explain the requirements to you in simple language. So basically, the Trademarks Act requires three things: distinctiveness, originality, and legitimate ownership. So those are the three elements. I'll break them down individually. So let's talk about distinctiveness. For your brand to be distinctive, you need to be mindful of what your brand name should not be. As in, you want to choose a brand that doesn't describe what you're selling or what you're offering. So for example, the computer shop for a computer store, or the excellent cafe for a cafe or a restaurant. I know it makes sense to use a descriptive name to educate the public as to what your product is. However, you will find that it will be very difficult to register it as a trademark. So what you want is a brand name that is off the left field, crazy even, something that doesn't have a direct connection to your goods or services. So made up names really are actually the best. So a good example would be Lululemon, Starbucks, Sephora. So those sorts of names that are not related to what you're selling or what you're offering. To be distinctive, you also don't want to use a common term in your industry. So for example, Namaste for a yoga studio. So if anyone applies for a trademark for Namaste in relation to a yoga studio, that will be knocked back because the trademark examiner will say, hey, everyone in the yoga industry should be able to use that name. You can't have exclusive rights to the name. You also don't want to name your brand after a place. Any brand that refers to a place of origin will be knocked back in the first instance, same as the reason for common terms. The trademark examiner will say, hey, we can't give you the name Melbourne IT because anyone who does IT in Melbourne IT should not be stopped from using that name. And to be distinctive, you have to choose a trademark that doesn't exist already. So I will expand further on this topic in a minute, because this ties in with the second element of originality. But before we move on to the second element of originality, I thought I'd show you a little scale that I put together of what makes a strong trademarkable brand name. So the strongest is 1 and the weakest is 5 here. So the strongest brand names would be fanciful words, so as in made up words. So brands like Lululemon, Kodak, Starbucks, like they're big brand names, but as you can see, they don't describe or they're not related to what they're selling. Strong brand names would be, regular words for unrelated products as well. So arbitrary ones, so say Jaguar for cars, Apple for computers. Like these are actual names that exist in the dictionary, but Jaguar doesn't mean car. Apple doesn't mean computer. In the middle of the spectrum, I would suggest that they are also strong brand names, but not as strong as fanciful words. So Coppertone for a tanning line of products, Netflix for, it's like a portmanteau of internet and Flix. So it sort of suggests that they offer streaming services of movies over the internet, but it doesn't directly describe it, and Qantas for airlines. On the weaker side of the spectrum are, as I said, descriptive and generic names. So weak brands would be something like the Weather Channel, the Pilates class, and there's no one stopping you from using these names, but if you want to have exclusive ownership of these sorts of names with a trademark, it will be hard pressed for you to be able to obtain that. And the weakest part of the spectrum would be generic names. So examples are, Community Bank for bank, Sydney Hair Salon for a hair salon. And number 4 and 5, so descriptive and generic names, they're not just weak in a trademarkability sense, but also in the context of SEO and Google searches. So if you don't have a strong SEO or Google ad strategy in place, brand names that are descriptive, such as Community Bank or Sydney Hair Salon, are too generic and will just get diluted in the search results. So if they look for a Sydney Hair Salon, you're not necessarily, the top search results. So, but if you have a strong brand name and they Google that brand name, you'd always be the first one. So that pretty much wraps up distinctiveness. Let's move on to originality. So the second element of a trademarkable brand is originality. So pretty much the original. No one likes a copycat, much less the trademark examiner. So it goes without saying that if you know that a brand name already exists, don't use it as yours. And even if you don't know that a registered trademark already exists, that earlier trademark registration may stop you from using and trademarking yours. So even if you don't mean to, you can be an unwitting copycat. Trademark searches or pre-applications are very important to determine whether an identical or similar trademark already exists. It's something that every startup founder should definitely be doing in the early stages of the startup and choosing a brand name. And even if your brand is not identical to an existing registered trademark, if your brand is confusingly similar to an existing registered trademark, you may still face infringement action. And if you apply for your trademark, you may be rejected on the basis that a similar trademark already exists. So I thought I'd talk about examples as to when this actually happened. So these are examples of brands that are not identical, but were stopped because they're similar to an existing trademark. So I'll talk about In-N-Out and Down and Out. So In-N-Out, some of you may be familiar with them. They're a big US burger chain. They're quite well known here in Australia. They've done some pop-ups in Sydney, and I think because of the success, there was a burger chain that sort of rode on the coattails of that success and called their burger chain called Down and Out. As you can see, they're not identical, but they're deceptively similar in that it could deceive the public as to what the source of their products are. So this is actually a big case that lasted for about 2 years. It was only decided pretty much early or late 2020. But long story short, In-N-Out was able to stop Down and Out, and Down and Out was pretty much forced to stop using that name. They eventually lost the case, and funnily enough, they rebranded to Nameless. I know it's shaky, but yeah, they're now called Nameless. Second example would be Aesop and Bearsop. So Bearsop is a soap company, a new startup, and their trademark application for the name Bearsop was opposed and stopped by Aesop, that big international cosmetics company, on the basis of deceptive similarity. So because the goods and services that they offer are similar, so soaps, and Aesop sell soaps, Aesop was able to present a case to the trademark examiner that, hey, you can't let this trademark registration go through because it sounds very similar to our name in relation to the same products and services. So, but the thing about this is, when this trademark opposition happened, Bearsop had already launched their business, as in they already had their packaging printed, they already had their products manufactured, they've already launched their website and their online store, and I believe they've already started selling to customers. So the fact that their trademarks were opposed, that means Aesop is now, well, they're now in Aesop's radar, and they will have to rebrand at some point, if not already. So you can imagine that would be a very time-consuming and expensive undertaking. So that pretty much wraps up the originality elements of trademarkability. So as you can see, securing a trademark from the very beginning will help you avoid spending thousands of dollars on brand design, launching your product or your services, and product rollout, only to find out you're infringing on someone else's trademark and having to rebrand. All right, third element of trademarkability would be ownership. So this sort of ties in with doing your due diligence before starting a brand name, but this is more applicable to trademarking logos and copyright. The Trademarks Act, the legislation requires that you are the owner of the trademark at the time of filing the trademark. So when getting a logo professionally made, normally you'd go to agencies or a graphic designer to get your logo made, but not when you go through these sort of avenues or agencies or people to make your trademark, they only actually just give you an exclusive license to use the logo. So that means the copyright is owned by the agency or the graphic designer, and you only get a license to use the logo. So that means you don't own the copyright for that trademark. So if you apply to trademark that, that means you don't own it. So that may disqualify you from getting that trademark registration through. So if you're getting a logo made, whether by an agency or a graphic designer, places like Fiverr, make sure that copyright is transferred to you, as in you are the trademark owner, on the data filing. So speaking of logos, many of us use Canva because it's easy and cheap. Like I'm guilty of using Canva like to do my prototypes of, my earlier logos for my early startups. But did you know that you can't trademark logos that you make on Canva? When using Canva, it's part of their conditions of use that they only license their templates and their images and fonts to you. So that means if you use their templates, their logos, their fonts, that means you don't own what you actually download. That means you can't trademark it if you wanted to have ownership of that logo that you made on Canva. So that's just a little handy tip. So the originality element of trademarkability also ties back to making sure that no one already owns your trademark. So apart from logos, this also applies to phrases that another company may be already using, such as I'm loving it, owned by McDonald's. I'm pretty sure it's trademarked, but you don't want to be using phrases that other companies are already using in relation to their goods and services. So to avoid this, to make sure that no one else owns a trademark, make sure copyright is transferred to you, and you get a trademark search conducted in relation to phrases. So those are pretty much the three elements of trademarkability. So my hot tips for me. So when you're choosing a brand name, you want to choose a brand name with scalability in mind. So you want to choose a brand name that will be suitable as your company grows. So using the three elements that I talked about of trademarkability would be a good place to start. In particular, don't describe your product or use the name of a place. So you want a brand that will still fit with you as your startup grows. So you don't want your startup to outgrow your brand name. So to scale your business, to have a brand name that scales with your startup, you don't want to be doing what Barbody and Bedthreads did when they chose their business names in the beginning of their startup. So Barbody and Bedthreads are two successful startups that emerged in the last 10 or so years. So Barbody, they started as a bar studio. So bar is a style of workout, very similar to Pilates, with some ballet elements. So it became popular in the last 5 or so years. When they started, they were pretty much only just offering bar. But the startup became so successful that they expanded to Pilates, dance, yoga, and they're now doing Pilates teacher training. But as you can see, the name Barbody doesn't really reflect this expansion. And Bedthreads, they started as an online bedding store, but they have since expanded to homewares and tableware. By naming the brand Bedthreads from the beginning and keeping it, it doesn't exactly signal to their target audience that they offer more than bed linen. So when you look at Bedthreads, you only think of bed linen. It doesn't sort of signal to you that they sell more than that. So you want to choose a name that does not limit the public's impression of you and what you sell and offer. So as we wrap up the topic of trademarkability, I thought I'd show you these brands. So these brands form part of Forbes' list of 2020's most valuable brands. You'll see that they have the elements of what makes a trademarkable. So none of them are descriptive. None of them is a name of a geographical place of origin. They're mostly made up names such as Starbucks and Pepsi. And the fact that they're all registered trademarks, one can assume that they all did their due diligence when choosing these brand names from the beginning and went on to trademark them since. So imagine if Apple had decided they were going to call themselves the Clever Computer Company, or Google decided that they were going to call them name the Really Fast Internet Search Company. It would have been a completely different story. So you wanna pretty much stick to those elements to be able to have strong brands such as these examples. So it's not just brands and brand names that you can trademark. You can trademark pretty much basically any sign that you want the public to associate with you in relation to your goods and services. So we've touched on logos, so the Apple logo, the Nike swoosh. If you're going to be using a logo as your app icon or your social media photos, it's recommendable that you trademark those too. You can trademark phrases such as just do it, I'm loving it for Starbucks. You can also trademark product getup and designs. The Limp Bunny is a registered trademark. Glossier, this USA cosmetics company, was able to trademark their pink box because they were able to pretty much prove that their audience associate the pink box to their company. And you can also trademark colors and sounds. So the Tiffany blue is a registered trademark, the UPS brown, Cadbury purple, those are registered trademarks. And you can also trademark sounds. So that intro sound when you open the Netflix app, I'm not gonna try to recreate it, but that sound, that's actually trademarked. So as I said, it's quite risky not just to be gung-ho when going about starting your startup and then just coming up with a brand name. You really need to do your due diligence, and if you can, apply for a trademark. So this is not an exhaustive list of the risks, but these are the ones that will definitely apply to you if you're a startup. So if you don't get around to registering a trademark, or at least do a trademark search, someone else may beat you to it. So trademark filings, not just in Australia, but all over the world, are in a first in, best dressed priority sort of system. So if someone else applies for a trademark before you do, even just for one day, they will be given priority over yours. And if their trademark goes through, that's it. They'll have grounds to stop you from using your trademark or your brand name. And if you don't have a trademark registration, you will find it difficult to stop copycats or other businesses or other startups or other companies or other people really from using your brand name without a trademark registration. You have the only avenue you have is by suing them under consumer law, which can be really expensive and time consuming, as in you're going to have to go to court pretty much. With a registered, if you don't register your trademark, not just in Australia, but mainly in China and the USA, you may be victimized by trademark pirates. So trademark pirates are pretty much domain name squatters. So once they get wind of your brand name and see that, hey, they're successful in Australia or elsewhere, they'll try to register that name, that trademark. This happens normally in China, and then with pretty much bad faith as background, and with pretty much the purpose of hijacking the trademark, so that if you expand to those markets, you're going to have to buy the trademarks off them normally. Normally in very expensive amounts. And speaking of expensive amounts and lawsuits, with a registered trademark, you'll be able to prevent expensive lawsuits and having to rebrand. So As mentioned earlier in the presentation, getting a trademark will provide you with peace of mind that you're starting and running your startup on a strong footing. That pretty much covers all I wanted to cover. As Lloyd has mentioned earlier, we are allocating pretty much lots of time for you guys to ask questions. So if you have any questions, fire away.
Awesome. I can see lots of questions that are coming through via Slido. So just a reminder to everyone to keep submitting them and upvote the ones that you feel like that, yeah, they're great questions to ask. So Raquel, I might fire away some at you if you're ready.
Sure.
So one of the ones right at the top, should I register my brand name or my logo?
You want to register both. You'll want to apply for both if budget will allow it. But basically, anything that is important to your business, you'll want to register as a trademark. Anything that you don't want other people to copy or pretty much appropriate, anything that you want to own exclusively, you'll want to trademark it. But if budget only allows for one, I would suggest applying for your brand name.
Awesome, great advice. Here's an interesting one. What happens if someone has trademarked a name, but it is not in the same industry as my service? So I guess this is someone wanting to use a name, is trademarked elsewhere, but not in the same industry.
Yes. So with that one, at first instance, you'll be able to trademark yours. So say a good example would be Dove, the cosmetics company, the personal care company, and Dove chocolate. So your brand can coexist with someone with an identical brand name, just as long as your the goods and services that you're claiming as a trademark is not related or similar or identical to an already registered trademark.
Awesome, thank you. Some great commentary was coming through about Canva. I love that point there. I didn't know that because I love Canva. I use it all the time.
Yes, so useful.
Yeah. So really interesting that you can't trademark logos made in Canva. Does that apply to all of the platforms that are similar to Canva as well, or is that just a Canva specific thing?
You will have to look at the conditions of use for the other platforms, but I would imagine they're the same. So you want copyright ownership of what you will be applying for as a trademark. So as I said, conditions of use for Canva is that you can use it, you can download it, but they own the copyright to it. So as I mentioned before, if you used Fiverr or graphic designers or even big agencies, normally they just give you an exclusive license to use the artwork or the logos. And if you want legitimate ownership for your trademark, you'd want the copyright to be transferred over to you. So I guess going back to the question, you're going to have to look at the conditions of use of those platforms that you use.
Okay, what happens if I've decided on a name, started trading, but have now discovered someone else has a similar name? What are my options?
So your options will depend on the circumstances. So if that other person or other company already has a registered trademark, then you risk infringement action by that company. But if you find that they don't have a trademark registration, then jump in straight away and register your brand name as a trademark. So then you can stop that other party from using that same trademark.
Great. Is it worth trademarking in the US as well as Australia?
So it will really depend on where you want to expand or which countries you want to operate in. So if you're going to be operating in the USA or even shipping products to the USA, that's still some sort of form of business, you'd want to register a trademark in those countries as well. If you don't, you'll risk infringement action if someone already owns a trademark in those countries. And in the same token, if you register a trademark in those countries, you'll be able to stop people or companies or businesses in those countries from using the same trademark as yours.
Great. And just out of interest, is that a separate process per country, or is there a global thing?
Yes.
I'm curious.
Very good question. So yes, the way trademarks work is that it's a country by country filing basis. So you to get a trademark in different countries, you'll have to apply to those countries individually. But if you have a trademarks attorney in Australia, they'll be able to file in those countries for you instead of you engaging separate attorneys in those countries via a system called the Madrid Protocol. So the Madrid Protocol is pretty much an agreement between countries where member countries can accept trademark applications based on the business's home country trademark application. So that's an option if you want to expand to the international market. So that will save you time and money having to engage individual attorneys in each country. But yeah, going back to the question, you'll have to apply for trademarks in all of those countries that you want to have trademark or brand protection in.
Awesome. Again, probably a loaded question, but what are the ballpark costs and timings to register a trademark?
Yes, so let's talk about Australia to begin with. So it will depend on how many goods and services that you want your trademark to cover. So for example, you have an online clothing store. You want to be covered for the classes that covers apparel and clothing and retail. So those are two classes. Normally they would start at around $400 per class. So if you just wanted to be covered for apparel, that's around $400 thereabouts. If you are going to do it yourself, but if you want to be covered for retail as well as clothing, then that's pretty much two classes. So it's 2 times 400 pretty much. So it will really depend on how many products and services you want to be covered for. The more goods and services and items and services that you want to cover, the more expensive it will be. So you have to be smart about it.
Understandably. Here's a good question. What is the difference between, so on packaging, a TM, trademark, and R? Yes. So the TM symbol, you can put that next to your brand name once you've already applied for a trademark. So that means, that signifies to the world that you've got pending trademark rights over that brand or whatever it is that you're trademarking. Then once your trademark successfully proceeds to registration, then you can change it to that R symbol. But the R symbol is very exclusive to pretty much entities that actually have a registered trademark. It's actually an offense to use the R symbol if you don't have a registered trademark. But yeah, they're both useful. Okay, good to know. Does a trademarked brand name improve SEO and appear higher in Google searches, or are they unrelated?
So if a registered trademark, it really depends on your SEO or Google ad strategy. So you may want to use generic descriptions, which will then direct those Google searches to your brand. But if you use a trademark that is very generic, such as I mentioned before, Sydney Hair Salon. If someone Googled Sydney Hair Salon, you're not necessarily the top results if you don't have a good SEO or Google ad strategy for you to be at the top, because because it's so generic, you'll be diluted from many other search results. So it will really depend on your Google Ads and SEO strategy.
Great.
But having a trademark and sticking by those 3 elements of trademarkability, having a name that actually is not a description of your business or your goods and services actually stands out. So it's actually beneficial to have a name that, as I said, is not a description of what you're selling. So say, for example, if I Googled activewear and then a brand name called, Active Living had a Google Ads sort of strategy, but and if your brand name says Active Living was pretty much close to the result that says, say, Lululemon will stand out more rather than the Active Living.
Great, I love that answer. So what I'm hearing is that at first instance, a trademark brand name wouldn't necessarily, or it's not related to a higher rank in Google searches. It's more about your strategy behind naming your brand and
exactly.
pulling it all in together.
Yeah.
There's a couple of questions about the UGG brand. I'll ask a bit of a double barrel. When did UGG in Australia realise they had potentially infringed UGG in America? And I don't know if you're familiar. I'm hoping you can speak to it.
So it's a case that's still ongoing. So the thing about that is the guy who came up with the name UGG sold the trademark to a US company. So now a US company is suing a guy who's using the name UGG in relation to his business, not as a trademark, but just a description of him selling UGG boots. So I don't have the exact year as to when UGG was first used in Australia, but I would imagine it was around 80s to 70s, maybe even earlier. But this is why you really need to register a trademark, because, as I said, it's commercial. It's something that you can commercialize. It's something that you can sell. So even if UGG originated in Australia, since the trademark was sold to an American company, it's not necessarily Australian anymore per se. So yeah.
That's really interesting. I find that really interesting.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate.
Yeah. The second part of that question, I think you've already answered it, was can you trademark once for the entire world? But it depends on the countries that you're.
Yes. Yeah, there's no blanket, international trademark per se. As I said, it's country by country basis. You'll have to apply in each country.
Okay. Just picking through these questions. If I get a question wrong that's been submitted from the audience, please let me know via the chat. I'm going to try and... so what if you can show evidence that you have used it first, for example, a slogan you have used online or in a hashtag, is that considered in trademark applications?
Yes, so if you applied for a trademark that doesn't meet at first instance the requirements of the Trademarks Act, the Trademarks Examiner will come back to you saying, hey, it doesn't meet the Trademarks Act, but we'll give you a chance to provide evidence that you have been using this trademark and that you have gained reputation in relation to this phrase or trademark in relation to your goods and services. So it's not an instant knockback by the Trademark Examiner. They will give you a chance to prove that you own this trademark, as mainly that you have reputation in that trademark, in that the public will sort of think of you when they hear that particular phrase or see that particular logo or hear that particular name, but it has to be very strong evidence. So normally they will ask, years of use. They will ask for evidence of you using that for marketing. They will even ask for your revenue and turnover and all of those sorts of things. But yeah, like it's not an instant knockback, but yeah, they will ask you for evidence. You'll need to be able to prove that you have reputation in that particular phrase or trademark or a brand name or a logo.
That's great to know that that pathway exists if you are knocked back.
Yes.
On the timing, when is the right time to trademark your brand?
Yes. Yes, it's pretty much ASAP. So time is of the essence. As I said before, trademark registrations are on a first to file sort of basis. So if someone else beats you to it by even 1 day, they will be given priority for examination. If they're successful, they'll get that trademark. With a timeline from filing to registration in Australia, it lasts typically from filing to registration. The standard time frame is 7.5 months. So you want to get in as early as possible. So you want to launch with an actual registered trademark. New Zealand is slightly faster. Normally they process their trademark applications in about 5 months. In the USA, they've got a massive backlog at the moment because of COVID. It takes about 1.5 years. Canada's even worse, about 2 years. But in the context of Australia, it's about 7.5 months from filing to registration. And yeah, you want to get in as soon as possible.
Good. Act now, people. Act now.
Yes.
Not a question, but a comment from the audience. This is so helpful. Thank you, Raquel. So I just wanted to pass that one on while we're in the room all together.
I'm glad.
Really connected with the audience. We've got a few to go, and I know we are running out of time, so we'll try and answer. I think we've got 5 questions left unanswered, so we'll try and do a bit of a rapid fire. How come knockoff brands continue to survive on the streets of Asia and even in the USA and elsewhere?
So it really comes down to brand enforcement. So if you have the means to, you will want to crack down on all of these sorts of people. I guess the answer to that would be some companies just don't bother because it's so prevalent. So but if you can, there are laws that exist in all of these countries, and to be able to stop them, one of the first things that the courts will ask will be a trademark registration.
Great, good to know. Out of interest, does a trademark apply to band or singing names? So if it
band or singing names. Yeah, so if you a band name could also be a brand name, because if you have a band name, that means your audience would know that that is you. So if you want to hold on to that name, and if you want to have exclusive right to that name so that no one else copies you, you can definitely trademark that in relation to music production, live performance, all of those sorts of things. Yes, so band names, definitely you can trademark them as a brand name if you don't want other people using it.
Fantastic. It seems like people have really, so if I have a band, I can trademark that name. I don't,
yes,
I'll be careful, but good to know.
Yes.
People have really cottoned on with this UGG theme. Here's an interesting one.
Yeah.
So why can Greeks trademark feta and a Greek product and have exclusive country rights? Why can't Aussies do that for UGG, as it's a generic term?
Yeah, so this is like a whole different realm of trademarks law. But I guess it comes down to, so there are different names such as feta for cheese, champagne for alcohol, where in there, it comes down to international law that prevents other parties using those names if they're not the actual, if their products don't originate from all of those countries. So that also comes down to trademarkability. That's one of the requirements. If your trademark breaches those parts of international law, then you'll get knocked back. In relation to UGG, there's actually some chatter in the legal community that UGG is actually now a generic name in that it's now a descriptive name for a product. So it sort of dilutes its value, such as, let's see, examples would be aspirin. I feel like Panadol will become generic too. So Band-Aids in relation to, you know, plastic strips, those sorts of things. So there's a chance that the name UGG will now be seen by the courts as descriptive and generic, and that means no particular party or company or person can own that name exclusively. So that trademark could be cancelled out as an actual trademark that someone can exclusively use in the future. So watch this space, it's still in the courts.
Wow, interesting. Definitely watch this space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Last question for the day, and unless there's any other comments, but what happens if I've accidentally infringed on a trademark? Is my only option to rebrand?
So if you've infringed on a trademark, yeah, so it will really depends on what you will negotiate with the company who you're infringing on. You may reach out to them and obtain consent. So that's an option. But if they're a company that won't pretty much give you leeway to use the trademark, then yes, you may have to rebrand.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time, Raquel. I think last steps before we close is next steps. How can people connect with yourself? What's the future look like for Raquel and Legiterati?
Yeah, so sorry I couldn't get to all of the questions, but if any of your answers, if any of your questions weren't answered in this webinar, you can always shoot me an email. So it's just there, hello@legiterati.com. So if you have any trademark, brand protection, brand naming sort of questions, please send them through. I would love to answer your questions. If you want to book in a 15-minute consult, if you have more specific, longer than, email sort of questions, you can pretty much do that via the website, legiterati.com. And you can also find me on Instagram. You can always send me a DM through there as well. So yeah, I'm always happy to answer any questions you may have, because as I said, this is one of those things that it's really important when you start your startup, but you don't really know where to go, or you have this impression that it may be expensive. But yeah, I'm your person for these sorts of questions. So please don't hesitate to send me an email or connect with me on Instagram.
Fantastic, will do. Thank you so much, Raquel. You're part of the Generator community. You've been through one of our programs. You've gone on to do great things, and you're back here helping everyone. So I know the audience is very appreciative of your time. I'm extremely appreciative of your time and the webinar you've put on today and expertise you've shared with the audience. A big thank you to the audience. We will send this recording out shortly as well, so stay tuned to your inboxes for that. But a big thank you. I hope everyone can get outside and enjoy the day, and we'll see you at our next event. Thanks, Raquel.
Thanks, Lloyd. Thanks, guys. Have a good day.